go. All right. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Greg Eckel.
It's Dr. Jonathan Nadal.
And we've got a really fun one today. Is life is vibration, and it's all on bioenergetics. So we're going into the etheric, we're going into the stars, we're going into the universe, and that's just who we are. So that's let's talk about energy medicine. This one, it's got a lot of historical basis, but when you start talking about energy medicine, it seems like the real scientists poo-poo it, or you can use these terms called woo-woo. But the more you get in on this, the more you realize the folks that are saying that actually aren't in or up to date on the science. And in fact, it's really interesting to see how close science is coming into this quantum physics world, right? I think those terms get tossed around willy-nilly, but without a fundamental understanding of what we're talking about here. So with not wanting to have people glaze over, we are going to talk about some, ninth grade high school science stuff around atoms and matter, because it really does matter, right?
Yeah.
I'm in one of those moods today. Sorry, Doc.
No, hey, keep the waves coming. That's good.
Yes, there you. Bum. Nice. So those components, I have been saying for a few years, the future of medicine is in energy, light and sound frequencies. What are we talking about? Because our heads start to go, well, what is it exactly? We can't quite put our finger on it. We've got Dr. Beverly Rubik has done, I think she put bioenergetics on the map as far as the National Institutes of Health, to be able to create some grants to study this aspect of medicine. I'm doing a huge summit coming up in the fall. In November, I've been interviewing over 40 world experts in different facets of bioenergetics. So I'm going to bring that into our discussion. But we're going to start with just matter is created from atoms, and atoms are made of protons and neutrons. So again, don't glaze over yet, or don't at all, because this one's going to be exciting. So these protons and neutrons, they create weight within an atom. But if we compressed all of those with the electrons kind of circling around that center core, we would have this, we'd push it down into like the grain of the sand. And it's hard for our brains to really comprehend that. Like, we learn it's all vibration. In fact, like this hard table that the computer setup is on, it feels really hard and physical. But if you really got in on that on a molecular level, we could really compress that down into really almost nothing. So it's really these little atoms kind of creating the structure and mass of our reality. And this is where it gets trippy, I'll just say. So those oscillations or vibrations around that core create fields that can be measured. And you may have noticed that just in, going to the beach or going to the mountains, going next to a river, you might just intuitively feel better, right? But why? Why do we say, going to take a walk on the beach is great for folks that have depression? It's that effervescent positron, or the electrons that are released from the ocean, that actually affect us as energetic bodies. Great book out there called The Body Electric, and talking about us as electric beings, like we have receptors for light. So, I started it out in kind of in the science of it, talking about fields, but then, so we've got waves and particles, and you can actually have both of these things together. So how would you link quantum theory into all of this?
Yes, thanks Good prequel. I mean, so I think it was Einstein, right? Where matter can behave in wave-like forms, and waves can have properties that are like matter as well. So not, I mean, almost interchangeable ultimately when we're talking energy. Um, it's kind of like if you're in a space and you shine a flashlight and you can see sometimes things swirling in the space that you didn't realize was there. So, I mean, there is the wave of light, but there is the particles within it. And the particles are subject to the things that are happening in the wave. So they're interwoven in that way. And some of what you were talking about, I mean, if we picture the periodic table, all the matter, all the atoms, it's just a different number of them. So literally we're saying one is different. Like if we compare it to beans, it's like comparing one element is 7 beans to another element that's 12 beans, but it's all beans. It's all just atoms, electrons, protons, neutrons. There's
Yeah.
nothing besides the fundamental forces that are a part of that. There's not a whole lot of difference. So it makes you wonder, like, okay, well, what's really making the difference between you and I, the tree, and that body of water out there? Other than how dense and concentrated or condensed that matter and that consciousness is. And I appreciate the idea of even walking to the beach, because it's not just the greater flow, but salt water, those are atoms, those are ions. There's a reason why the moon has an impact on it, just like on our own fluid dynamics. So with all those ions moving around us in greater concentration when you're in or near the ocean, of course that's going to have an impact on us, right? So, I mean, all of that well supported quantum wise. Where do you go from there? I mean, we know, like you said, the future of healing and health is going to be with sound and light. I think back to this distinction between the upper senses, right, where it's sound and vision, versus the lower senses, which is more taste, skin, your nose, your sense of smell. I think a lot of pharmacology and treatments, if you go back decades, focused on more gross, like physical matter, things that they could see reactions and change in real time. You know, kind of like in high school chemistry, when you mix these things and you see it bubble up, like that's kind of the high that a lot of scientists were after, and that's fun and that's great. But we realize that what's going on at the cellular level, or even at the level of DNA, I mean, most of our cells are filled with, even the filaments are, there's light activity within the bonds within cells, right? So there's a bunch of fluid and light within us. How are we only going to focus on changing the structural matter without focusing on the energetics or the quantum properties of the cell as well, right?
Yeah. You know, it's a hard, almost dichotomy to inhabit both of these realities, because they're simultaneously happening at the same time. You might be asking yourself, well, how can that be? How can it be, you know, a particle and the wave form at the same time? So I love your analogy of the light, flashing a flashlight into a dusty room. Like the vision I had was all of the dust that would be floating through. So you've got the light wave, and then you have the particles of the dust floating in there, and they're inhabiting the same space at the same time. You know, this quantum theory component, I mean, it's one, fun to say quantum, right, with a Q. If you're a Scrabble player, it's a great one to pull out. But it is that mass can change to energy, and energy can change to mass. And I've said on a couple interviews, a couple different summits, of like really addressing ourselves as the light beings that we are. You know, there's some statements around, you know, you're a spiritual being having a human experience. Or, you know, Rudolf Steiner was lecturing at the turn of the century around talking to the quote unquote so-called dead, because he understood that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It only changes forms. So it's like these people or loved ones that are no longer in these bodies, these meat suits or matter packets, they're back into an energetic sense. So that's a little bit out there, right? But I'm getting more and more comfortable speaking into that, because that is my belief system of behind treating we're pretending to be separate in this reality. And ultimately, the whole entity, which is just mind-boggling, beautiful, is one. Like in this concept and theory of oneness, we've become the 10,000 things in Chinese medicine, shattered from the source and the center. And so bringing that into this discussion between the particle mass and waveform energy and having those two things together, let's just talk about, again, it's a little bit heady at the beginning, but stick with us, folks, because it's going to get juicy as we talk about, well, what does this matter for me or to you? Like, how do we employ this clinically? So we talk about the photon as the fundamental unit of light. It can behave as a wave or as a particle. So that's the photon. And I always think about Star Trek when I talk about photons. And then like light, matter, the physical form, has the wave-like capabilities. And perhaps we can experience that like with an earthquake. If you've ever been on the road driving during an earthquake, you see, oh no, the earth actually, it starts moving like a wave, right? Like, and things start coming apart. The matter comes apart like that when it gets into the light or wave-like form. So those, it's interesting. They can sometimes inhabit the same space, but most of the time we're one root or the other. They can change back and forth, but we sometimes get stuck in just the physical form, the biochemistry, the physiology, the pieces to pieces aspect, but forget that it's actually the field that is creating, compressing, and creating the patterns that we are seeing in matter. So it's actually the bioresonance or the biofield that is creating that structure. One tangent, if I may, this is in Rupert Sheldrake has this concept of a morphogenic resonance of how do things know to grow into the thing that they are, right? And well, how is that? So it's all about the field, the field, that energetic wave component encompassing the essence of something. So, I mean, it's miraculous life that we're born, number one, the odds of being born, while yes, okay, overpopulation can occur, but still the odds of birth, mind-blowing. And then for us to actually develop into these amazing beings that we are, with all of the different tissue types, like we still don't really know how that all works, right? And so I wonder if I just kind of put that concept of morphogenic fields, Rupert Sheldrake, kind of in this wave particle discussion, where do you go with that?
Yeah, everywhere. I mean, because then you gotta just kind of, tip of the hat to like even Steiner, you mentioned him, like these ideas of different bodies, like the etheric and astral, like all these levels or these layers of bodies that are outside of just physical matter on us. It kind of is speaking to that. Like we know that some of the astral and outer forces actually have a downward compressing effect that oppose some of the other forces within us, right? So, and this is kind of the same idea if we think of the resonance theory with Sheldrake, because whether you're a salamander regrowing a limb, right, or you're a human being developing an embryo and you're starting osteogenesis, right, another good Scrabble word, right, where your bones are developing, at about 8 weeks, they just know how to form. And interestingly, that's maybe when you start getting the lines in your hands, which people read your palm and determine your future. In Chinese medicine, that's when the Shen is starting to inhabit the body. Like there's just the spirit. So it's like so many of these things have evidence in biology and some of the more anthroposophic or spiritual sciences that we no longer need to separate them. But I think if anything, have the conversation of how to bring them together, because there's a lot of inherent wisdom there.
Yeah. That component of, let's call it positive and negative, or the battery energy for life, right? We'll just say that. Really bringing that into our conversation around how do we address heart-centered beings moving through time and space besides just physical form? Because, there are, we're, the truth of the matter is we're born, we live, and we die, right? We can create any other stories over top of that. And there's some really marvelous stories to create over top of that. Um, you can have a boring story, you can have an exciting story. It's up to you. You get to choose. I'd rather have the exciting story, personally, because it's just a lot more fun and interesting. So we look at this biofield, or this electrical field, that a resonance that gets created around the human being, off of our electromagnetic charges. Like when you look at how our nervous system works, it's positive and negative electrons flowing across a plasma membrane wall. It's phenomenal. I mean, sight, hearing, taste, smell, our senses, our deep pressure, light pressure, all of that is just the same type of signal. But more importantly, where I'm going with that is around that nervous system, there's a field, electromagnetic field, that gets created around all of our organs, our electromagnetic fields that get created because of the magnetism, because of the currents, because of the energetics of those pieces and parts. So in Chinese medicine, which we'll default to here in the bioenergetic realm, we have the 5 elements or organ networks. Well, they've got energetics associated with the heart and the lungs, the liver, the kidneys. So there is the 5 elements that have their own energetic resonance, representation in nature. So what is happening in the macrocosm happens in the microcosm. We have the whole component of sound waves as well, from our heart beating in our chest cavity. And that drum is a sound wave. Those sound waves then influence our bodies. They also influence our surroundings. And I think a lot of times we don't realize that. Like in the past, maybe at some of these enlightenment periods through time, they had a much deeper sense or reverence for their spiritual connection of the oneness of like, oh, actually, I matter. Literally, I am matter. I matter, right? We'll get the I am out of there and just I matter, in that you're here. You made it into this incarnation, that miracle of life and birth, and then having your specific network set up that then also feeds back into the one. Like without you, this world would be entirely different, right? A lot of times I think our disconnect and our separation and our levels of depression and anxiety, it's that suffering states are the further we are from source and forgetting that it's actually us. And so I know I'm going out there today, but that's just kind of my mood. And I think it's time, to really start speaking into this, because this is such a broad topic and we can go anywhere, but I'm just going with like, okay, what's coming up with Dr. Nadal right here in this moment to share with all of you out there for, we'll even put an intention out. How about that? Because this component of our observation of certain activities will actually change the reaction in a scientific experiment. They're showing human observation will change the outcome of an experiment. Like, so why don't we use that to our fullest? So in this instance, I'm going to just say, hey, let's put out an intention that we have divine messaging reaching you all and us at this moment in time to affect the greatest change in our highest, greatest good, from a heart-centered space. Like, let's just go for it and see where we wind up. But by intentionally organizing the one in that vein of like, okay, we're these light beings getting compressed down here into this physical body. And then, remembering that actually we are much greater than ourselves, I think could be really, really beneficial in these days and these times. I don't know about you, Dr. Nadal, but when I look outside and seeing what's getting reflected back to me as the one, it's really disorganized. It's chaotic. Sometimes it's just plain ugly. It's just like, wow, what are we doing? And so that's as a representation of me, like I've got to acknowledge, like, hey, let's get this thing organized and beautified and, energized. So I'll stop blabbing. Let's see what comes up for you around that.
No, absolutely. I mean, because there's a yin and a yang to every day, every moment, and there's good and bad within both, right? It's not, it's learning from what nature's trying to teach us in our bodies and outside of it, and just bringing it to a higher vibration, right? I mean, we see, it made me think of, where do you find the most joy or harmony out in nature, right? Usually it's when everything harmoniously follows the path of least resistance, right? And we know that water behaves this way, even in a different way, but fire, like all the elements follow this path, where fire will consume wood, right? Metal in Chinese medicine will bear water, and so on and so forth. So it's a matter of meeting resistance with the necessary change, and following the best way out and through. We can call it channeling your bliss. That's from another book or source it somewhere, but I like the way it sounds, because that's all we're trying to do in our own way, marching to the beat of our own drum. And I couldn't help but picture this image, like, as far as what we are as moment to moment beings that are co-creating this space simultaneously. I'll borrow more of a hermetic idea, but this notion of infinite universal mind, or infinite universal living mind, where it's like we are constantly co-creating this all together. And depending on how we dip into that field that day or that moment, and how that exchange happens, where the dominoes go, who knows? But with that as well, you picture even a photograph, right? Because when we talk about electrons not being at the same place, just seconds later or fragments of a second later, neither are we. Even when someone takes, the newest iPhone picture, whatever it is, that is simply light leaving the person just fragments of a second later. You are capturing the image that's going and launching off into space for infinity and beyond, regardless. Right? So there is more evidence for the impermanence of reality and how we're co-creating it constantly than there is otherwise, right?
Yeah, I think so. Takes us in two directions. One, I want to kind of get back into talking about particles and movement and their activities. And then I also want to talk about the 5 elements. You kind of went through that cycle a little bit, but in mimicking nature or following nature, and in that oneness concept, I want to really explicitly go through the elements and how that creation cycle occurs in a Chinese medicine framework. There's multiple different frameworks, right? I mean, it's like we can get into fractal discussions around fractals of like infinite out, infinite in. It just never ends. Infinity is a really cool concept in this discussion as well. But let's start right where I wanted to go, and I'll bring us back to the 5 elements. But the concept of there's even virtual particles, like you were saying, like we're not even in the same place at the same time when you really think about it, right? I mean, we think that there's a permanent structure here, but we're on a freaking spinning orb in an immense universe, spinning. I mean, we're spinning every day and rotating around a sun. I mean, we tend to like take that for granted, like we're on a moving planet, right? But it doesn't feel like it's moving at this moment in time, but we do. If we have a different perspective, we see that. Okay, that's one concept. The other one, virtual particles. So they don't exist except when they're observed or acted upon. So there are these concept of virtual particles that, that concept that we can influence an experiment by observation. So that's why I put out that intention today. A single electron or proton can move in 2 directions or more simultaneously. So it is at the same time. So it's not it's not as linear as we were taught, or that Cartesian, linear fashion of like, this is us moving through time and space.
Mhm.
Um, no two electrons can move with the same motion at the same time. So there's, no two. So everything is moving interconnected wise, like one is moving the other. The same particle can move in two different directions at the same time, which I already mentioned, but I wanted to emphasize that, in that our brains tend to be the limiting factor in this discussion. So then the last concept that I want to bring up here is around entanglement, because we've heard that having particles once connected, two particles can then influence each other in entirely different, or wave particles. So the particle or the waveform can continue to affect each other no matter where in the universe they are. That concept of entanglement, where there's one particle over here, one way far away, but they're behaving in the same fashion, but in entirely different foci or locations. So that these concepts are fun to play around with, especially when we start talking about healing and what we bring into the clinical arena and into discussion. Just as a, for instance, on the intentions, just talking with a patient this morning, she was in tears, where just talking about prayer. She was praying over some cells that we're going to inject back into her body. And just the process of those intentions, like, what are your intentions for these cells, of that they come in and they heal my brain, and they stop my body from, they just basically, I want to state it in the positive. So healing my brain, giving me balance and motion and mobility and smoothness of gait, and having deep peace and rest in my body. Like, these things, when you say them, and you don't even need to do a procedure, like, these could be your intentions for the day, but utilizing these concepts on a day-to-day basis can really help organize matter, because we're talking into that biofield. And I'm always blown away, Doc, on how intricate the Chinese medicine system is, right? Because of the bioenergetics of it. I mean, we're sticking small acupuncture points on meridians that we can't measure or see, and affecting change all over the body. They have these elements and the creation component. So I wanted to, maybe if you want to speak into any of that component on particle wave, kind of some of the quantum physics discussion, and or I'll just lob over the elements as well.
Yeah, all of it. Sure. I mean, and we could lean into the Chinese medicine, because I feel like they've addressed and talked about these things in a lot of different ways. I mean, let's call for fun, let's call the matter a little bit more the yin side of things, and the wave the more yang side of things, right?
Okay.
We think yang, more active, dynamic, moving, hard to fully grasp, and so on and so forth, as opposed to yin, or matter, more in the material realm of things, more earthbound, more stationary, if we want. So if we just jump off with those into the Tao, the 10,000 things, but organizing them by all of the manifestations of yin and yang on this little place we call Earth, we've noticed that it's convenient to group it into 5 different elements, right? Just for our sake of understanding. And it is very unique, but it's not necessarily new. We find that the Greeks, even Unani medicine and all these older traditions, had some type of organization like this, right? It just made sense to use nature to understand ourselves, because we're not separate from nature, we're a part of it, right? So if we think about the yin and yang side of each of the elements, it informs us even more of this wave versus matter like property, where, for instance, if we begin even with wood is more material and yin like in its ability to be rooted into the ground and be sturdy, and in some cases just immutable and stationary, but in its expansive and ever growing aspect towards the sky, of course, is very yang like as well. So when we defer to the organ systems, which is the West's best way of correlating it to something, we have the more yang gallbladder of the wood network and the more yin side of the liver, we find a lot of faster activity and just bile and everything happening a lot more quickly and readily with the gallbladder, and a lot more of the detoxing, just different complexes that the liver has to work through. Like, yeah, that's a little more yin in nature. So you don't have to go that far in it, right? And then as a lot of these things are burnt up through the wood element and you shift over to the fire element, right? The heart or even the small intestine, we have, you know, very young organ, given that it's fire to begin with its brilliance and shine and everything that the heart is a part of. But we can't ignore the fact that it is rooted in some type of kind of pillar within the kidneys, right? So heart and fire, they're both kind of these opposite poles that are connected as one. So in there, we can draw from the yin aspect of the heart to make sure that our spirit isn't just aimlessly soaring around constantly. Because even in Chinese medicine, too much joy is a problem, which is,
Yeah.
but so, and these are just examples of like, okay, like yin and yang, matter, wave-like. And I feel like there are some organs and elements that have, at least at first appearance, more one than the other. But if you dig a little more deeply, the more sublime lesson is to understand that they are both, no matter what. So, I mean, we can keep going, just burning up that wood through fire, and we return to earth. Through earth, we move deeper into the ground to where we find metal, right? And from there, from metal, eventually drawn to water. That is the generation cycle. We know there's also the ka, or just restricting cycle, where elements have placed limits on each other. And we know that sometimes they can overact on each other. Clinically, we find every once in a while, for instance, that the earth is overacting wood, right?
Mm,
Right. And
yeah.
so in the West, we, if the spleen or stomach, if there's dysfunction there, of course, yeah, we somehow eventually find dysfunction with the gallbladder or liver. So it's not even that out there. Like the pathologies can line up really nicely. You get some of the main ideas. I mean, I feel like they can go back and forth very easily. And when it comes to quantum understanding of the elements, nature, and ourselves, and the condensation of these forces within us, are very neatly explained with Chinese medicine in many ways.
Yeah. So we have this underpinning and this background, right? I'm going to mention just one kind of out there component on telekinesis. And some of the studies that are occurring now with non-verbal communication, in fact, just thought form communication, and they've done some twin studies of one twin really thinking of an image, and the other twin is, halfway around the globe. And they asked the other twin in these studies, like, well, what was the image? And, better than statistically, like better than placebo, they actually are getting a clear picture of what the image is. This is like remote prayer, distant prayer, hands-off healing. There is more and more research coming out to support its effectiveness and its use. So I'm a big proponent of we should use all of the levels of healing.
Yeah.
And so we've got that component of, nonverbal communication. Well, let's work on that. Like, what is your brain emitting at this moment in time? I would say for a greater percentage of the population, it's fear, it's nervousness, it's we're in a flight or fight or freeze state of being. That's emanating out of you. Well, if we're dealing with a oneness, that means what we're putting out is what we're getting back. And so it becomes our responsibility to really check in on what is it that I'm putting out? Because if I don't like how I'm feeling, then I need to actually take some actions to change that, right?
Yeah. And I appreciate, you probably did it on purpose, but even save for the spelling, but the response ability, we really do, right? Like we
Yeah.
have the ability to change our responses. And as a human being on this planet, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're engaging in that way, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we don't like to hear that. We'd like somebody else to do it. We'd love to get, maybe, maybe the government or somebody over there, like maybe somebody could fix this mess, right?
Mhm.
But ultimately it's us, like we're the mess. And so if we start to wake up to that concept and understanding in a bioenergetics realm, is that it's the field creating matter. If we don't like what we're seeing in the world, well, it's not going to change out there. It has to change in here. Like you look at all of these great textbooks and all of the great kind of sages and the sage information coming down that has withstood the test of time. It's an inside job. And so like looking at it like, yes, there's some things that we want to reduce suffering as physicians and providers and
Right.
address that. And we can do that. We can do that with pain. We can do that with, mental illness. We can do that with a lot of different illnesses. But ultimately, it's not really changing the underlying issue.
Yeah, yeah. And well said. I mean, each player to his part, right? Like
Yeah,
at once, of course, I feel like I need 5 or 6 lifetimes to really accomplish even a percentage of the tasks that I want, right? Like top down, of course, like societal and governmental changes. Yes, of course, there needs to be changes, but
yeah,
in a different way, not even lower, just in a different totem pole altogether. That's where we have, I'll just say, almost the divine responsibility to, as physicians, to go more from what you're talking about. Like it is an inside job. Like, so I feel like we can empower and help propel our patients to understand and remember that perspective on where and how to look and remember what really needs to change first. If we're going to choose what we're willing to change and what control we truly have, that's where we come into play, and I think that we excel usually.
yeah, it is. It's a different way. I call it kind of the Aikido style of practicing medicine,
Mhm.
which is get out of the way and push, right? So if you're not familiar with Aikido as a martial arts, this comes out of Japan, and it's really about using the momentum and force, not pushing up against it, but really getting out of the way and pushing. And one of the stories that I remember on how to remember what this is, imagine in the dojo, the training facility, small Chinese or Japanese master of Aikido, and huge American, like 300-pound, like linebacker, right? And the teacher says, "Okay, Joe, bring it. I want you to bring everything." And Joe's like, "No, I can't do that. Like, I'm gonna squash you.
Mm.
You're tiny." And no, master says, "No, bring it, or I'm gonna kick you out of here. You'll never be welcome back if you don't follow my orders." Joe's like, okay, reluctantly, he's like, okay, I got to go squash my master. And he goes charging at this small Japanese man, frail, 80s. And next thing you know, Joe is getting flipped in the air, like hurtling through the air, and this humongous bang as he hits the ground. And he just looked bewildered, like, what in the world just happened? And the Aikido master, his whole lesson on it was just get out of the way and push. If he would have resisted head on with
Mhm.
Joe, the 300-pound gorilla, he would have been squashed, broken in many, many pieces. But he didn't do that. He
Yeah.
got out of the way and allowed Joe's force to continue to where it was going. And he just helped direct him closer to the ground by flipping him. And it was like an incredible scene to behold. And
Mhm.
it's like that is life, of getting out of the way and pushing. Life is happening for us. It's just, are we going to resist it or not? Like, it is the reality. Like, I just had some friends, their son died of cancer. That's never supposed to happen, right? It's tragic, it's sad, it's heartbreaking, and it happened, right? My own personal story of losing, my wife Soraya left her body 4 years ago. That's not supposed to happen that way in, your young 40s. Had I resisted that, I would have been squashed, depressed, I mean, addictions, whatever, the ways that we cover up the hurt and the agony and the pain. Did it hurt? Certainly it hurt. But had I resisted it, or have these parents resisted their son with his cancer, it would be ultra, ultra tragic. But to turn whatever those life events are and those currents that are in our lives, of just accepting what the reality is and making, basically lemonade out of lemons. Of how do you do that? Doesn't mean you're never sad. It doesn't mean you're never depressed. It doesn't mean, you don't have those emotions. You're angry or upset or, cursing at God for allowing this to happen like that. But it does mean you don't get stuck in those emotions. You don't get stuck in those currents of life. You get out of the way and push, because that's the way through, right?
Yes.
So in that energetic fashion, it's my long-winded story of just getting out of the way and pushing, but not resisting. The question that I have been asking myself lately is, what am I resisting? And when you actually ask that of your own internal intelligence, you may be surprised at what the answer is. I know when I discovered the answer for me, I just started laughing uncontrollably of like, whoa, it could actually be that simple. Just ask yourself and get the answer. Like the old Cat Stevens song, "The answer lies within," right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of sage advice and wisdom there.
The founder, I believe his name was Muriya Yushiba, and he was part of one of the last samurai families, and he was a little smaller and not the strongest, and partially out of that is where he developed Aikido, so it just, going with the flow, working through the resistance. And I mean, beautifully said. I'm sure he would smile if he understood how we use Aikido as an analogy. I mean, they're even teaching like different combat agencies or FBI, like they're learning Aikido to learn flow states. They're trained in all these crazy martial arts, but they're learning Aikido for flow states. Wow. So
it is. So using that in a bioenergetics discussion of life is vibration.
Yeah.
Now, we'd be remiss to not mention some of the technologies that we've come across to really put some information into our systems as the light beings we are. We're using laser therapies and low-level light therapies, or low-level laser therapies, LLLT. That just rolls right off the tongue. In a photobiomodulation is the kind of the 10-cent word there. It is putting energy into an energetic system. So how does light therapies work? I mean, now we've measured the admittance of light off of the DNA strands of the human being. Our bodies we are light beings. Like, I'm not just kind of messing around with like, oh, we're these light beings being compressed into matter. It's actually, science is showing, no, we actually are radiant light beings. Like, when do we start acting like that, or behaving or embodying this term of embodiment, of realizing and waking back up to that, like, wow, we haven't really been taught that we're sovereign light beings. Like, how does someone that understands that operate in the world, right? Well, that's somebody that's walking in the world that has, basically emitting love from their heart and creating, like, that's a sense that you can feel. Like, if you've ever come across people that are like embodying it, they're in their bodies and their hearts are open, you like to be around those people, right? I mean, I know I do. And you can actually feel it on whether you know it or not. You can feel that, I feel safe. I'm more, maybe a little bit more in touch with my emotions. Perhaps I'm more grounded. Maybe I know a little bit more, like I can get a little bit more creative because my guard is down, because I'm not walking around in alert mode, because there's somebody here that's safe. They're walking around with their hearts open and with love coming through. Well, some of the techniques and styles that, and if that just seems like so far-fetched, like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've got my defenses up all the time. I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop right now because it always does. Like, look at all this evidence, Dr. Greg and Dr. Jonathan. I got, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. We can't help you if you're going to cling to that paper. So if you're willing to maybe just step out into that wild with us, well, we have some techniques that can help. We can help fortify the body. We can put these light pads on ourselves. We paint the body with this very potent song modulated laser, which stands for Strahan Ovicatus node generating laser. It's a red light laser that goes through a filtration system that changes the phase conjugate of the wave to elongating it, allowing it to go through the whole body rather than hitting the matter and stopping or scattering or being absorbed entirely. So it goes right through our whole bodies, through our brains. We're able to paint the body in light. Energizing, like our little mitochondria in there are very hungry for their light receptors that you say, oh yes, feed us. Like you've heard of red light therapy. Well, this is it on, but with a potent Thor laser. With pulsed electromagnetic frequencies, again, creating a healing frequency around the body helps the body remember to go back into a healing resonance rather than into a dysfunctional resonance. Well, I guess I'm just on a total ramble, Dr. Nadal today. But on that front, I want to just kind of put in the plug that if you're feeling stuck, or if you're just thinking like, gosh, that is so far from where I am inhabiting right now, we're offering you for a consult, like get on the horn with us. Let's talk about what's going on, because we may not be the best fit for you, but we do know, like, we got into this for service, is to serve people. And if we could be of assistance to you or your families or your networks or your community, please get in touch with us, because this is what we're up to. Like, we're creating these centers around the country, if not globe at this point. And we want to get the message out because we're seeing some really miraculous things happening clinically with conditions that should not reverse, like Parkinson's, like Alzheimer's, dementia. I mean, even orthopedic issues of like torn meniscus or, hips needing replaced that no longer need replaced. We're not claiming cure, but we're seeing the body definitely do its thing, given the right information. And we're looking for other therapies to help put that information into the body. So we've got light. The other one that I'm really excited about is sound. And you, as a drummer, Dr. Nadal, I think can speak into that. I mean, most everybody that has listened to music knows it can emit or help us get in touch with certain emotions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And just every vibration, right? I mean, I think from the smallest cymbal, very high pitched, to gongs, to big drums, little drums. I mean, it's one of the oldest instruments, right? Like I'll talk about it all day, but I mean, if we think back even in utero, like the first drum that we hear, our mother's heartbeat, like there is a cadence and a rhythm to our life and nature that our body yearns for. It is a healing machine. And I feel like through light and sound, we just pull the curtains open again and remind it that it can heal. Just got to give it the right information. Right?
I love it. Any last closing remarks or comments that you'd like to put out there?
Besides that one?
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, no, just really reach out to us. I mean, we see it's after all these years, it's so many different conditions, so many different situations. It's like just the fact that we care so much and have access to so many different tools and modes of thinking and therapeutics. Like, we're here to help. So whatever's going on, just reach out to us, set up a consultation. And if we can't, we will probably send you in the right direction. So just know that we're here to help.
Love it. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to What the Health, the Doctors Chat. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at support@naturecureswithansclinic.com, support@naturecuresclinic.com. I know it just rolls off the tongue too. But we are serious about that. Like, let's get some dialogue. Let's get some input. Let's get some energy. Together, we all rise together. So nobody gets left behind. We're in it with you. You're not have to be alone anymore. So really, thank you all. We wouldn't be doing it without you. Please share the show with your friends, family, communities. We want to get the word out, and we want to help as many people as we can. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Till next time.